Now, to show a preview, we'll use the Google Maps static API, which is simply another API offered by Google under that Google Maps umbrella, so to say. And that's a very simple API, which we can use to create snapshots of locations on a map. So images of a certain place on a map, you could say. Now on this page here, you'll find an example for the kind of URL you must construct to generate such a snapshot, because it's basically an image that is created on the fly based on the configuration you set up in this URL here. And I'll copy this URL therefore, and I'll use that for generating such a preview. And we don't need to generate the preview here where we get the location. Instead, as I just said, it's basically a URL that directly leads to an image that will be created on the fly. Therefore, we can directly output that image with a widget, and I'll simply add a getter which will contain this URL here so that we don't need to put this long URL into our widget tree. Instead, here in the location input state class, I'll add a new getter that will return a string, because in the end it simply will return this URL with all the necessary data plugged into it. And I'll name my getter location image, because in the end, again, it will provide a URL, a link to an image. And I'll simply return that string here, as a string of course, but now we have to plug in all the necessary data. And of course, that's a very long string, and you should make sure that it's all in one line, but we will also shorten it here, no worries. Because for example here, this center part, which here for me by default is sent to Brooklyn Bridge, New York, NY, should be replaced with the latitude and longitude coordinates. So for that here in the getter, we can get the latitude by reaching out to the picked location and accessing the latitude there. And the same, of course, for the longitude, which we also get from the picked location and then longitude. Now here, I actually can be certain that this will not be null, because I'll only use this URL if we are showing a preview, which we will only do down there, at least soon, if we have a picked place. But we could also add an extra check here, where we check if picked location is equal to null, in which case we could return an empty string here, if we wanted to. Then we can be super certain that this will not be null. So with that, we got latitude and longitude, and this should now be injected into this string after center here, so that we have lat, comma, and then longitude. Now the zoom level, I'll set this to 16. And for the size here, I'll keep 600 by 300. This simply defines the size of the image that will be generated, and it's width times height. Now for the map type, we want to keep road map, but now for the markers, we can delete a lot of stuff here. With that markers configuration here, you simply configure which markers will be part of that image, so you control which pins will be on the map. And here I want to have a marker, but only one. Therefore, you can delete all other and markers parts with all their configuration except for the first one. And that will make that URL way shorter. So everything up to and key is deleted here, because we will still need to add our API key here later. And then here for that one marker that we kept, you can choose the color, and you can choose from those base colors like red, blue, and so on. So here I'll pick red. Now the label here simply defines which character is shown in the marker, and I'll simply pick A. And then thereafter, you have this %7C separator, which you should keep, but then you again have the latitude where the marker should be placed. And that of course should be the same latitude as is the center of this place, and the longitude. And here I just saw that after center, we should have an equal sign. But with that back on the marker, that should be the marker configuration. And now we just also need to add the API key, which we also are using down here. So it's the same API key. Copy that and inject that here. And then we can delete this signature part here. It's not required. And with that, we have a getter that generates such a snapshot URL that should be usable as an image. And therefore, as a next step, we can go down to the widget. And there, I now want to check if we have a picked location. So if this is not null, and in that case, preview content should be set equal to an image widget using the network constructor, because we're now fetching an image over the network via that URL that is returned by our getter. So here I'll refer to my location image getter that we just added, and I'll add fit box fit cover and make sure that we use the full width with double infinity and height with double infinity inside of that container that we're using. And the container we're using is, of course, that container that has preview content as a child. And with that, we should be showing a preview of our place after it was picked. Now, at the moment, we won't really be able to test this because we have a couple of errors in our code because we updated that place model. And to be able to test this, I will actually revert those changes, at least temporarily, and comment out the parameter and this property in the place class so that the rest of the app will work and we can check whether fetching and previewing a location here works. So back here in the app, if I click Get Current Location, it starts to fetch. And let's see if it eventually finishes. Looking good. It shows a location, and by the way, on the Android simulator, the default location always is basically the main Google building in Silicon Valley. So that's what we're seeing here. But that all seems to work. And if I open the debug console, I also see no errors related to that. So this all is looking good, and we therefore are able to fetch and preview a location. Now we can make sure that we're also using this location in the rest of the app.